Oh no. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the LEA Special Education Point of Contact monthly webinar for February. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. For those of you who are still logging in, thank you for joining us. For those of you who may be new here, a copy of today's presentation is available for download through GoToWebinar. You will be able to access the slides from this morning's presentation by going to our handouts menu and downloading the presentation in PDF format. We encourage you to share this presentation with your school teams, and we will be getting started shortly. Again, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our webinar this morning. And a reminder that you are able to, if you have any questions throughout this presentation, feel free to drop them in the chat, and be sure to download a copy of today's presentation in our handouts tab. My name is Tiffany Ingram, and I am a program analyst here in the K-12 Systems and division here at OSSE, and we will be getting right started with our webinar today. This is our agenda for this morning. We have some policy reminders and updates that we like to share with you, as well as some IDA reminders and updates. We will hear from our transportation team. They'll provide us some updates, and we will close out today's webinar with reminders and announcements. I am going to turn over the mic to Christy, and she'll be sharing with us some policy reminders and updates.
Good morning, everybody. This is Christy Weaver-Harris. I am the Policy Manager in the Division of K-12 Systems and Supports and the Office of Special Education. I'm going to be talking to you about a couple of different things today, so let's jump in. All right, first, a reminder that ESY certification is due Monday, May 2nd, 2022 for the 2022 ESY period. So this is where you are submitting data to OSSE and within a variety of data systems that allows both LEAs and non-publics and OSSE to really plan for appropriate planning and staffing for the summer months, and it allows us to anticipate state level expenses and our transportation obligations. Next slide. So this is the list of tasks that I know you all wait for every year. So the list of required tasks and due dates for ESY for this year. So this will also be communicated to LEA leaders and LEA special education points of contact through an email that we generally send every year. That should be going out very shortly. I'm hoping maybe next week. So you will get this in paper form soon. But to clarify from last month's webinar, part of ESY certification does include entering information in the SLED ESY module and in eSchool Plus. So you're doing your eligibility determinations in SEDS, you're doing your TRFs in TOTE, creating your ESY calendar in eSchool Plus, and you're going to need to probably work with your LEA data manager on that. And then you're making sure that site locations are listed and then assigned within the SLED ESY module. And I do want to highlight that last task on this list. LEAs must document ESY attendance for students, OSSE's funding structures, and our processes related to ESY funding are back to standard practices again for 2022. So ESY funding for public charter LEAs is paid on a per pupil basis for students who are eligible and actually attend ESY services. And you're demonstrating that attendance to us by completing the daily attendance in the SLED ESY module, right? So the student must have an ESY attendance status of partially attended or attended in SLED. And that's like one indicator of attendance for like the whole ESY period. And that has to be completed within 5 business days after ESY ends for your LEA. So when our funding folks are looking to issue your checks around this, they do go into that ESY module and make sure that we are paying the per pupil amount for the students who attended. So make sure that you are connecting with your LEA data manager to ensure that the attendance is input there. And again, that has to be completed within 5 business days after the program ends, and that's consistent with OSSE's LEA data management policy. Just as a reminder, any updates to student records that need to occur must be done within 5 business days in the appropriate data system, including SEDS, and that is part of our LEA data management policy. Next slide, please. So again, here's some ESY resources to help you during this process. We have our policy, we have an FAQ document, and then we also have a policy bulletin that was issued last year that kind of goes over some of the more specific situations of LEA obligations. So students who are transferring, students who are transitioning from Part C, students who are transitioning from closing charters, that's all in the policy bulletin there. And if you ever have any questions about ESY, you can always contact me directly, or you can contact my team at osse.dsepolicy@dc.gov. Next slide. All right, so for today, the bulk of what I'm going to talk to you about is prior written notices, or PWNs. We've heard from you that you would like some more information and a little bit of training on this. So PWNs are written notice to the parent when the LEA is proposing or refusing a change to the child's identification, so their identification as a student with a disability, their evaluation, or conducting an evaluation or a reevaluation, the educational placement, which does include the service location under our district laws, and the provision or the receipt of FAPE for the student. So those are pretty broad circumstances, and SEDS kindly prompts you to complete a PWN when it is required. But generally speaking, PWNs are really a place to show your work and explain what is happening and why, and provide the parent notice of that. Next slide. So these are the list of PWN types that are available in SEDS. So when you are required to issue a PWN to the parent, you have to select the type of PWN that you're issuing. And there are some other, like the proceed and do not proceed touch points can occur at different times in the evaluation process or for different reasons. And there are PWNs for each of those circumstances. So for example, there's a specific PWN type for proceeding with the evaluation process after referral, but prior to a reevaluation. And there are specific PWNs for when a parent refuses to proceed or does not respond to a request to proceed. So there's a bunch of different types in here. There's also your catch-all of other notice related to FAPE. And I want you to really treat PWNs as an opportunity to show your work. I'm going to say that a couple of times throughout the slide deck. But you can always issue a PWN to document something that you need to make sure is communicated to the parent. Next slide, please. All right, so PWNs are required to include all these components. This is from the federal law. But these components are also automated in SEDS. So the PWN must describe the action proposed or refused, give an explanation of why that action is being taken or not being taken, and you have to provide a description of essentially like the data or the reasoning used as a basis for that decision. So those are your what, why, and how, and you need to be describing what you're doing, why you're doing it, and how you came to that decision. In terms of actual like descriptive content, you're also required to explain what other options were considered, and why they were rejected, as well as any other relevant factors or considerations that affected that decision and that should be documented. So if there's other external issues, like it's kind of your catch-all, right? You're also required to ensure that there are certain statements about parental protections and sources for assistance and how they can seek assistance with understanding their requirement or their entitlements under Part B. And again, those components are like present in our systems. So what I know you really want to hear about is what you need to be saying in each of these descriptions. Next slide. So we often get questions on how to draft a PWN. And again, really my best advice here is to show your work. Make sure the descriptions of the actions and the reasonings are detailed and relevant so a parent can understand what is happening and why. And you need to make sure that you're providing sufficient detail that parents can meaningfully participate in decisions about their students' education, right? Like that goes back to ensuring meaningful participation in like IEP team meetings and in the student's education in general. So this is one of those components of PWN is. The timing of PWNs must be provided so that parents have enough time to fully consider the change and respond to the action before it is implemented. And I get that's kind of tricky because you also shouldn't send a PWN prior to an IEP team meeting to discuss that change because that suggests predetermination of the decision without parent input. So I would recommend that you use the PWN as a way of documenting the decisions that are made at those meetings, but still give the parent some time frame to respond if needed. And another thing that comes up fairly frequently, the LEA is still required to provide a PWN even when it's the parent that is proposing the change. So a common example of this is having to issue a PWN providing notice that like a student's FAPE is affected when the parent elects to unenroll a child from your LEA. The parent may have made the decision to unenroll the child, but they're still entitled to a PWN describing the effects of that decision. So essentially, the parent elects to unenroll. The action that the LEA is then taking as a result is unenrolling the student, and they will be exited from SEDS, and they will no longer be eligible for FAPE or to receive services from that LEA. And you are required to document that in a PWN. And again, you want to be describing the what, why, and how of the decision was made. Again, even if the parent was involved in the decision or present at the meeting to discuss it. So think of PWN, again, as an opportunity to show your work and to document those decisions. You want to ensure that descriptions or statements that you make in the PWN are relevant and specific to the circumstances. Don't copy and paste PWNs between students. We see it all the time. We know that Johnny is not a she or maybe is not a they. We see this in our monitoring that information is copied and pasted back and forth. PWNs that use like boilerplate or overly broad language instead of language that's specific to those child circumstances is likely to raise concerns if you get into a litigation situation, or if OSSE reviews PWNs as part of our monitoring. You want to, again, make sure that it's specific and it's relevant. An example here is that we see, for example, when we are administratively exiting students, we go to check the PWN to make sure that the parent was notified of that, and we see a PWN that is not relevant for the exit code that OSSE is reviewing, right? So an example here is a student was exited for, a student had not been attending the LEA. The student was exited due to the LEA's truancy protocols, the truancy policy. But the PWN said that the student was being exited because they had moved out of state. So when OSSE is reviewing that, we are looking to see that if the student is being exited due to truancy, that the PWN mentions truancy or explains why the student is being exited related to truancy, not that the student moved out of state. The student may have been truant because they moved out of state, but you need to make sure that the language that you have in that PWN is specific to the circumstances and relevant to the action being taken and the like the student level impact of that action. Next slide. So PWNs are first and foremost a procedural safeguard for parents and students, but OSSE may also be looking at PWNs in a few of our monitoring and oversight activities. And when OSSE is looking at the content, again, it's really to make sure that the document was providing notice to the parent of the action being taken and that it is relevant to the outcome the impact on the student. So in our context of IDA monitoring, Karen's team may look at the content of a PWN when reviewing compliance with timelines, and that's including initial evaluations, reevaluations, and during our C2B transition monitoring activities. We may also be looking at PWNs as part of OSSE's risk-based monitoring, so during student file review, for on-site monitoring, or during desktop monitoring. Another context in which OSSE looks at PWNs, again, is when confirming the administrative exit of a student from the SEDS roster. OSSE's entry and exit guidance shows you the steps required for like each type of exit and tells you when OSSE will be looking to confirm a PWN was issued. So again, the tip there is to make sure your PWN is relevant for the action being taken and the description is related to the student level impacts of that action. So this is kind of a quick overview of what you're required to do and when we might be looking at it. It's certainly not like a full substantive training here because that's not the intent of these meetings. But I want to be clear here that like we do hear you, and I hear that you want more on PWNs, you want more guidance, you want more training, and we're being thoughtful about how to incorporate PWNs and like notice and parent communications in general in our upcoming trainings. And like somewhat related, unrelated, but I want to flag here that we do anticipate that the new Chapter 30 regulations will go effective on July 1, and we are preparing trainings and resources to help you implement the new and changed requirements. I'm going to have more information on the trainings and the timing of those in next month's webinar, but I've heard from a couple of LEAs that you're starting to prepare for like summer PD and planning, and I wanted to get it on your radar that OSSE will have trainings, we will have resources for you to adapt and use in your own trainings. Just wanted to make you aware that that would be available, and we will also be incorporating in our trainings more information around providing notice to parents. A quick question that I see in the chat, an example of when a student is receiving a certificate of completion and what's the best language to use in those PWNs. That is a really tricky situation because, as you know, when a student receives an IEP certificate of completion, it does not affect their ability to access FAPE. A student only exits special education when they receive a high school diploma. A certificate does not exit a student from special education. You are actually not required to issue a PWN when a student receives an IEP certificate of completion. If the student elects to unenroll as a result of receiving a certificate of completion, then you need to issue a PWN related to that student's exit. But the pure receipt of a certificate of completion does not affect a student's access for FAPE, so I would not recommend issuing a PWN in that instance. And if you have any other questions about PWNs, please be sure to throw them in the questions box in the chat. I will be taking a look throughout the remainder of the webinar. I always keep an eye on the questions box, but I'd be happy to answer any further questions. So the last topic that I'm going to talk about today, a completely new topic, is that OSSE is relaunching the Early Childhood Working Group. So we want to talk to LEAs that serve early childhood populations, so our 3 to 5 or 6-year-olds, about transition of students from Part C, access to data systems, child outcome summary process, and early childhood literacy and like strategies for students with disabilities. So it's kind of a wide array of topics, but we envision this as a long-standing working group that's going to discuss like these are the topics that we are aware of that we would like to discuss first. But we also want to talk about other topics that come up naturally that early childhood LEAs are facing. I'm sorry, LEAs that serve early childhood populations. This is not just for those specific LEAs. So again, our goal here is really to discuss and understand the pain points and the challenges that you all are experiencing, and identify and implement solutions at like OSSE's level, because we know that these are complicated issues, both from a sort of like administrative and data system standpoint and from a practice perspective. We're planning on these being bi-monthly, at least to start. We're open to adjusting that schedule once we get the ball rolling. So the first topics that we're going to tackle are transition from IDA Part C and access to student records, especially to prepare for students transitioning over the summer. And for students who are transitioning from Part C, who are not enrolled in your school in your current school year in accordance with your student information system, we're trying to look at ways to make sure that you can get access to those records. We are looking to update OSSE's policy related to early childhood transition, our guidance, and the current FAQ that we have. And this group will help inform those efforts. So if you would like to have input on the front end of that, please join us. Our first meeting will be on March 2nd, and I will drop the registration link in the chat in just a second. But if you have any questions about this, please feel free to contact me or Dawn Hilton.
Thank you so much, Christy. Again, if folks have questions for Christy after her slides, feel free to place them in the chat now. We will have time for Q&A at the conclusion of our webinar this morning. I'm going to turn it over to Karen to share a little bit more about our IDA monitoring reminders and updates.
Thank you, Tiffany. Good morning, everybody. This is Karen Morgan Donaldson, and I have 2 slides for you today. If we could go to the next slide, please. So this slide outlines all the monitoring and technical assistance in the area of Part B for the remainder of this school year only. So in April, as part of specific conditions imposed on the district by the Department of Education, OSSE, as the state agency, is required to monitor in the areas of secondary transition requirements and reevaluation timeliness. Just to give you a little more information about this, all LEAs that serve students 16 and older will be included in this year's secondary transition sampling. We use a weighted sample, and we monitor a total of 200 files from all LEAs that serve that population. The time period we will be monitoring for is from October 1st to March 31st. In addition, all LEAs that have a reevaluation, a student with a reevaluation due during that same time period of October 1st to March 31st will be included in the poll for this monitoring activity. Initial evaluation timeliness monitoring will be for the entire federal fiscal year 21, which is from July 1st to June 30th. So that will take place in July. Also, the initial provision of specialized instruction monitoring is listed here as well, as this is an ongoing monitoring activity that OSSE completes. This is part of the DL class action lawsuit. It is part of one of the subclasses of the transition from C to B. Just a quick reminder that LEAs are required to document the initial provision of specialized instruction for 3 to 5-year-olds. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so just quick reminders. This is kind of referencing back to what Christy presented upon, but documentation for untimely events. We've received a lot of questions as to exactly where we stand in terms of our COVID-19 delays and how we monitor for that and the flexibilities we're providing. So if your LEA has any eligibilities that are untimely due to COVID, please continue to document all required information in a PWN prior to the due date. So prior to the due date of the event. So this documentation should then be submitted via DC CATS, which is the District of Columbia Corrective Action Tracking System, during OSSE's planned monitoring activity window. So that would take place in April and or July. So we're looking at reevaluation, and we're also looking at initial evaluation. So OSSE, the monitoring team, will then review and determine if the documentation that you submitted through DC CATS includes the necessary criteria for a COVID-19 delay. So if you have any questions about writing a PWN in this circumstance, I first encourage you to refer back to the slides that Christy presented. If you have any questions after that, or if you have any questions directly related to monitoring, please feel free to reach out to me directly, or you can also put those questions in the question tab in GoToWebinar. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Karen. And again, this is a great opportunity to remind folks that you can download a copy of the slides that are presented today. When you click our handouts tab here in the GoToWebinar system, you'll be able to see that drop down and download a copy of these slides that were presented today. It's quality information that definitely should be shared beyond just our special education managers, directors, but also particularly that language around PWN, sharing that with your teachers and case managers as well. We are now going to transition to our transportation team and provide some updates. I'll turn it over to Doug.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Tiffany. You could go to the first slide, please. I know the last couple of webinars we've gone over the same items, but we just want to make sure that people understand our process here at OSSE and just to be aware of how we're handling the COVID-19 exposure notification and what to do if a student is exposed. It has been tested as being COVID positive, just to inform us of um, when that does occur. So we just want to make sure that you all notify us immediately, and we will suspend transportation services. While this, we are informed that the student will be need to be quarantined of exposure or symptomatic or things of that nature. Please make sure you all notify the Parent Resource Center at 202-576-5000, and we will temporarily suspend those services due to the quarantine uh, exposure period. I'm sorry. Also, if a student will be out longer than excess of 2 weeks, we just notify notify the Parent Resource Center, and we will also either pause the transportation if need be. Then also, if it need to be a longer time period than the 2 weeks, we could just cancel it and then reinstate the student with a new transportation request once the student returns to school. If there are any concerns about our COVID exposure procedures and protocols, just make sure you contact us um, at the Parent Resource Center at 202-576-5000, or you can reach out to the Parent Resource Center manager, Danisha Cruz, at danisha.cruz@dc.gov at 202-576-5000. And again, any of these updates can be found on our bus safety kits as well. And the link is also in the embedded in the on the page here. Next slide, please. Also, we're gearing up for ESY 2022 and also school year 2022-2023. And I know that time of the year is coming around. So we want to make sure that we have the correct information for your school. So if you're able to meet with the leadership at your school, just make sure that you have the correct bail times. And if you are going to a cohort schedule, make sure those students have the correct cohorts and inform us of those cohorts as well, exception days, half days, and holidays. And the most important things when we're preparing for the next school term, like ESY and school year SY 22-23, just making sure we have accurate student data. That's important for us, making sure we can pick up the student on time and make sure they're timely into the system as well. So verify the address with the parent to ensure that they didn't move in between school sessions, and also making sure that the parent contact information is correct as well, because if there's an emergency, we want to ensure that we can contact the parent at the right number. And the impact of us not having the right information, it can lead to increase in service failure and also route instability. So we want to make sure that our students are picked up in a timely manner and at the right location. So please communicate with the parents and get the correct information as well. And also, if you have any students that may fall under McKinney-Vento due to being homeless or displaced, make sure you reach back out to the parents at the end of every school term to see if they're still under that status, because we want to make sure we're updating that information correctly to know, so we can know if we have to go to Maryland or Virginia or to pick up these students and continue where they're staying at this time. So reach out to the parents as well to communicate that also. Next slide, please. And just to let you know the guidance that what the LEAs are responsible for the upcoming terms of ESY and SY 22-23. The data submission steps and everything that's required by the LEA. Make sure that they create the calendars in tote once the system is ready, and also create the transportation request for the student in the system as well. And we would verify all data verifications, making sure the system is configured, any data transfers, routing information once the student transportation is completed, and also the Q&A process to make sure that our routes are efficient for picking up the students. And then we also would communicate with the parents as well to say, hey, this is your student routing data, and letting them know, what time the student will be picked up for school. And again, the certification dates, as mentioned earlier, the first Monday in May for ESY 2022, and the certification date for SY 22-23 is the first Monday in June. We just want to make sure that all the data submissions is no fewer than 20 business days to the first day of the school beginning. And if you have any questions, you can also reach out to the TOTE support line at 202-576-5520, or you can email us at dot.data@dc.gov. And the system, we're working on configuration now, so we should have some notification go out to the LEAs soon, to inform them when they can start creating their calendars for ESY, or if they have for SY as well. But we should be ready to go sometime soon in March, so that notification will be coming out soon. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat and I'll answer them to the best of my abilities. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Doug. Again, if anyone has any questions throughout our presentation, feel free to place them in our questions box, and we are working hard to answer them. We will have a Q&A portion at the conclusion of our webinar. Turning it now over to Jen Carpenter, and she'll be providing some updates around and reminders and announcements from our teaching and learning team. Jennifer.
Thank you, Tiffany. Hi, everyone. You can go ahead and move to the next slide, Tiffany. That would be great. Thank you. I wanted to announce to this group that the Foundations of Special Education series is being reopened and relaunched as an asynchronous course. We have had some great participation, but people's time is really more precious than ever right now, and we want to be as flexible as we can with offering access to earn professional learning units and build your capacity to serve all students. And so I've provided a link to our Schoology home base for our Foundations of Special Education courses and verification codes, so that you or your staff members are able to use those verification codes to enter directly into the online courses that we're using to offer this content around developing and implementing high quality IEPs, and understanding the IEP team and process. So right now, as of right now, you can use the link, enroll, use the verification code, and get access to courses 1 and 2, which are focused on an introduction to special education and the IEP team and process. And once you're in there, you will have the ability to complete this asynchronously from now through the end of May of this year. I would love for you to note that we have hundreds and hundreds of teachers across the district that are up for recertification this summer. And this is an opportunity for them to earn lots and lots of professional learning units, whether or not they are currently working as special educators. It is one of our goals to build capacity across all sorts of teachers and serving students with disabilities and being really engaged members of IEP teams, whether or not they are the special educator. And so please do route your folks who are interested in learning more or needing to recertify in the direction of these courses. And again, in this case only, there is no need to go through our QuickBase registration. You can go directly into Schoology, because we are at a point of transition away from using that registration and into launching our new learning management system. So just use the information provided here to gain access. Next slide, please, Tiffany. Thank you. Also available is course 3, the assessment instruction cycle. It's open right now. The verification code is provided. Course 4 was due to launch at the end of this month. Because I am one of the people that's working to implement our new learning management system, I'm going to have to pause that course opening until April, so that I can, in fact, load it into our new LMS, and it will be offered there. So just maybe note for now that in April there will be access to the evidence-based instructional methods course as well. And I will announce the links and the codes to get into those courses here in a future webinar. Finally, I just want to note for your planning purposes that all of these courses will relaunch on our new learning management system with a summer offering and again in the fall. So for planning purposes, if you're going to be onboarding new special educators or new educators that are going to be working with co-teachers or any teacher that you want to make sure is prepared to do a great job of serving all of our learners regardless of ability status, think about this as a professional development option for them. Finally, just so you know, these online courses, they're asynchronous. There are requirements for reading, posting, completing quizzes or assignments, and viewing recorded webinars. There's a lot of additional resources there. And for each module, you can earn 3 PLUs. So that's 24 PLUs, which would be really great just for the first 2 courses. So something to think about and certainly to share with your colleagues. Next slide, please. I'm also would love to share for my teammates who are focused on multilingual learners that they will be hosting a conference, which will be held virtually on May 18th. They have just closed out their proposal submission, but we'd love for you to save the date for this conference, which is Raising the Standards for Inclusion and Instruction. It's going to be focused on being broadly inclusive of all students, but there will be some emphasis on dually identified students, and I really hope that you'll save the date and make the time to attend. I see a question. Is it possible to access the courses over the summer? Yes, Dr. Gregory, you absolutely can. And so we will have all the way through May, the current course material will be there in its current format. And then during that time, I will be facilitating, monitoring progress, giving people PLUs, but also rebuilding the content for a summer launch with our new learning management system. So around July 1st, we'll be launching it in our new learning management system so folks can get ready for the coming school year. And then that process will repeat for folks who are joining maybe late and want to go through these courses over the course of the coming school year. And if you want to learn more about our opportunities for now, you can check our Teaching and Learning PD Bulletin, which coming soon, it will link directly to our learning management system for a much smoother registration and attendance process.
Thanks so much, Jen.
Thank you.
Okay. A couple more announcements for today. Our DC Secondary Transition Community of Practice, which focuses on supporting our DC youth as they transition from high school into a self-directed life. So this is a community of practice of folks who come together from our LEAs, outside stakeholders, and organizations. And our next meeting is on Friday, February 18th from 10 to 11:30. And we're focusing on college and career readiness for students with disabilities. And we'll be having a discussion around how do we know what students need right now, learning a little bit more about coming together to see how we can best support our transition age youth as they are coming out of high school into being viable members of our community here, and trying to see what we can do, the supports that they need right now. We encourage folks who are interested in secondary transition, those LEA leaders who may be working in secondary schools to join us and join our community of practice. Again, our next meeting is February 18th. When you download the presentation today, you'll be able to access the community of practice website as well as register for the next virtual meeting. We are working to design our webinars to make sure we know we've given a plethora of information for you all and a wealth of knowledge that our speakers have shared today. Just closing things out with a checklist. So reminders of what's required coming up, finalizing student ESY eligibility no later than April 29th. and our ESY calendar no later than April 29th for your LEAs. Making sure you're reviewing your student records to ensure PWNs are included as necessary. And of course, we are definitely encouraging you to register for our Foundations of Special Education Series PD. So this kind of sums up our next steps from what we talked about in our webinar today, and giving you a checklist of kind of our next steps for your to take action for your LEA. Again, if you've missed one of our webinars, feel free to visit our webpage at LEA Special Education's Points of Contact. You will be able to watch our previous webinars and download all slide decks, presentations, and any other resources that were shared during previous webinars. And of course, a recording of this webinar and slides will be posted to that webpage within the week of today. You'll be able to go back and view our February webinar. Our next webinar will be Wednesday, March 16th. You'll be able to, if you need to, share this link with someone, be able to encourage other staff members to attend who may be new to your team or want to learn more about special education and hear from us in our monthly webinars. Please share that link with them as well. We encourage you to complete our survey, so you can use this QR code now to scan and provide us feedback. Again, we definitely try to use the data that you provide us in each monthly webinar survey to drive our content for next month or in following months in terms of what you would like to learn, feedback on how we can improve. We need your feedback. So I'm going to leave this slide up now. And Christy, if there are any questions in the slide, in the chat, you see that we may want to answer for the larger group before we log off today.
Sure, there's a few questions. One of them asking for an update on the new special education data system. So OSSE has procured a new special education data system that will be replacing the existing sets. It's very exciting. I think that we're very excited about it. It's been in the process for a very long time. So LEAs will be engaged for, the system will be both part IDA Part C, so our littles that are currently receiving early intervention services, and IDA Part B. We are on track for releasing the IDA Part C section of the system in October of 2022. LEAs will be engaged on the Part B side, so y'all's side, starting in April of this year. So in just 2 months, in April 2022, LEAs will see some information about that starting to come out around like requirements development. And we plan on launching the Part B side of the system for school year 23-24. It is quite a huge undertaking to do requirements and system design. So anticipate a new special education data system for the 23-24 school year. And we'll have more information on that as it becomes available. Every month we talk about whether we have appropriate information to share with you guys around that or not. But anticipate that coming in the 23-24 school year. There was a question around, I just wanted to note for you guys that I did drop into the chat registration for the Early Childhood Working Group link and a link for enrolling in the Foundations of Special Education series. And I also want to plug Jen's Foundations of Special Education series. It's an excellent series. It will give you a huge jump on Chapter 30 implementation. And when we are doing our trainings on Chapter 30 implementation, we will be referring directly to Jen's training. So definitely encourage you to register for that, share that with your colleagues, share it with your general education colleagues, because we're all in this together. Special education students are not just a special education issue. Someone asked around the Early Childhood Working Group meeting if March and May are going to be like repeated meetings. They will not be. We will be continuing the discussion from March in the May meeting, so please go ahead and register for both. And again, that's kind of going to be like a living working group where we will be addressing issues as you, the LEAs, raise them. So I really would love for you to participate in that and be on the front end of helping to make some decisions around really addressing the challenges that you see in that for your 3 to 5 year olds. Let's see. Karen did clarify that the initial secondary monitoring report will be released to LEAs during April. LEAs still have 30 days to make the 30-day corrections period, and then the final report is anticipated to be released in May, and that's specific for secondary transition. I saw a question around trainings for the new data system. Those trainings will roll out prior to the 23-24 school year. I'm not sure of the exact timing of them, but those trainings have not started yet. That's a next year issue. So don't worry about that just yet. Jen, are you still on? You are. When they click the link, it takes them to Schoology. I think that's intended, right?
Yes, it should take you to Schoology, and then you can enroll in a course by using the verification codes provided on the slide. So you might need the slides to be able to use those codes.
I think that is all of the questions. Please make sure that you complete the survey. I know that it is kind of repetitive to have to repeat it, you have to do it every month, but you do inform our upcoming plans for the next month's survey or the next month's webinar. And we are trying to make improvements to this webinar based on your feedback. So please provide us with some feedback for us to base it on.
Yes, thank you so much, Christy. Again, a copy of this webinar and the recording will be uploaded to our website by next week. And we thank you so much for everyone joining us this morning. And we look forward to seeing everyone in March. Have a great rest of the week.